You notice it before you can name it. Someone shifts in their seat, and something in you shifts too. A voice changes pitch, and you feel it in your chest before your mind processes the words. You've never called this a problem. You've called it awareness. You've called it being considerate. You've called it love. But it has been there for as long as you can remember. This quiet scanning, this constant reading of rooms, this invisible labor of tracking how everyone around you is feeling at any given moment. Not occasionally, always. And the strange part is that from the outside, you look fine, capable, present, someone others lean on. But underneath that, something costs you daily that no one ever sees. You were never just a person in the room. You were the room. There is a particular kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from doing too much. It comes from feeling too much on behalf of others, not your own emotions, though those are present too, layered quietly beneath everything else. What drains you most is the emotional weather of the people around you. Their tension becomes your tension. Their disappointment lands somewhere inside your body. Their discomfort feels like something you are somehow responsible for resolving. And the strangest part is that you don't experience this as intrusive. You experience it as normal. You've always been this way, or at least you've been this way for so long that the beginning of it has become invisible to you. Psychologists who study emotional development often observe this pattern forming very early, not in response to a single event, but in response to an environment where attunement to others became necessary, where reading the emotional states of a caregiver, a parent, a family member meant something, where sensing a shift in mood was not a casual observation, but a skill developed for navigation. Children in these environments learn quickly that emotional awareness is not just sensitivity, it is strategy. And strategies that keep us safe have a way of becoming permanent. What begins as adaptation becomes identity. You stop noticing that you're doing it because you've always done it. The monitoring becomes automatic. The adjustment becomes reflex. You walk into a space and before you've said a single word, you've already assessed the emotional temperature. You've already begun calibrating yourself to it. Not consciously, not deliberately. The way you might adjust your balance without thinking when the ground shifts beneath you. Attachment researchers have long noted that children who are emotionally attuned to caregiving figures often become adults who carry this attunement into every relationship. Not because something is wrong with them, because something was learned. Because the nervous system, which was shaped during those early years of relentless attention to others, does not simply unlearn what kept it safe. It carries those patterns forward the way a river carries the memory of its original course, even when the landscape changes around it. And so you became someone who absorbs, someone who senses, someone whose emotional radar is always quietly running. You can feel the tension before someone speaks. You can hear what's underneath the words someone uses. You can sense when someone is pretending to be fine, and something in you activates in response. Not because you decided to, because your nervous system learned that emotional disruption in others requires something from you, requires attention, requires action, requires repair. This is where the weight enters. Because responsibility is not something you consciously chose. It is something that got woven into you during years when the emotional stability of a room felt connected to what you did or didn't do, how you behaved, whether you stayed quiet or spoke up, whether you smiled at the right moment or noticed something was wrong before it became a problem. You learned that other people's emotional states were, at least partially, yours to manage. And that belief, quiet, unexamined, running beneath everything, does not announce itself. It simply shapes the way you move through every room, every relationship, every conversation where someone seems slightly off, and your mind begins immediately searching for what it might have done, for what it could do, for how to restore the equilibrium before anyone notices it was disturbed. There is a paradox at the center of this. The same quality that makes you remarkable to others, your sensitivity, your attunement, your ability to be present in a way most people simply aren't, is the same quality that makes you quietly exhausted in ways most people will never see. People come to you because you make them feel understood, seen, held, and you do this genuinely. You are not performing care. But what goes unnoticed is that you have been doing this since before you even knew what care was, before you understood that it was a choice and not an obligation. Winnicott, the psychoanalyst, wrote about the child who learns to organize their emotional world around the needs of a caregiver, who becomes, in some sense, emotionally responsible for another person's state, before they have developed a self solid enough to sustain that kind of weight. He described how this can produce a particular kind of person, someone deeply perceptive, someone remarkably empathetic, someone who has, in the most intimate sense, learned to disappear into the emotional needs of others as a way of remaining safe, as a way of belonging. The disappearing is never dramatic. That's what makes it so difficult to see. It doesn't look like sacrifice. It looks like generosity. It doesn't look like self-erasure. It looks like presence. You are the person who stays late when someone needs to talk, who notices a change in someone's tone and gently asks about it, who carries not just your own emotional weight, but a quiet portion of everyone else's, redistributing it through your own body so that the people around you don't have to feel too heavy. And because you do this well, because it comes naturally, because you've had decades of practice, people don't think of it as work. They think of it as who you are, and somewhere along the way, so did you. The cost, though, is never absent. It accumulates silently. You begin to feel responsible, not just for the people you love, but for strangers in a conversation who seem tense, for colleagues whose energy shifts without explanation, for friends who seem distant and leave you quietly analyzing what you might have done to create that distance. Your body carries questions others never think to ask. Did I say something wrong? Did I miss something? What do they need from me? What is expected of me here? Is this my fault? Neuroscience offers a quiet explanation for this. When the nervous system has spent years in a state of emotional vigilance, scanning, anticipating, adjusting, the neural pathways that support this vigilance become deeply grooved. What was once a learned behavior becomes an automatic one. The scanning is no longer a choice, it is a posture, a physiological default that doesn't distinguish between situations that require it and situations that don't. The body treats every emotionally ambiguous moment as a potential responsibility, as something that might need you. This is not anxiety in the way most people understand it. It is not panic. It is not disorder. It is, in the most precise sense, an adaptation that once served a purpose and now operates beyond the conditions that created it. You are not broken. You are running old software on new hardware. And the software was written to protect you in a world that no longer exists exactly as it did. The relationships this shapes are complicated and tender at once. You love in a particular way, with attention, with constancy, with a depth of perception that makes the people closest to you feel genuinely known. But you also love with an invisible contract written in the language of your nervous system. A contract that says your presence must be earned through usefulness, through reliability, through never being too much while always being enough. You make yourself smaller when someone else seems fragile. You hold your needs quietly when you sense that someone else's needs are already filling the room. You smile through your own discomfort because the effort of expressing it feels less bearable than the discomfort itself. And when someone asks how you're doing, you answer in a way designed to reassure them. Not because you're dishonest, because your default concern, even in that moment, is their comfort. The irony that clinicians frequently observe in people who carry this pattern is that they often have the most sophisticated emotional intelligence in every room and the most difficulty accessing their own inner life. They can decode others with remarkable accuracy and yet find themselves uncertain, even confused when asked what they themselves are feeling. Because the attention for so long has been outward. The skill was built for others, and the person who needed it most, the person doing all the feeling and all the managing, never became the object of their own careful attention. This is the slow recognition that sometimes arrives not dramatically, but in a quiet moment. A moment when you are alone and you realize you don't know what you actually want. Not what would keep the peace, not what would make someone else comfortable, not what would preserve the harmony of the room you're in, but what you, the person, beneath all the attunement and care and vigilance, actually feel, actually need, actually desire from this life. And that uncertainty, that small revealing blankness, is not a sign of emptiness. It is the natural result of having been so thoroughly oriented toward others for so long. The self that knows what it wants is not absent, it is simply unexercised, like a muscle that has atrophied quietly while all the other muscles were doing double the work. There is no resolution that arrives cleanly. There is no moment when the pattern simply stops. The nervous system does not forget its training overnight. The attunement does not switch off, and in many ways you would not want it to, because underneath all of it, beneath the exhaustion, beneath the invisible labor, beneath the quiet belief that other people's emotional states are yours to manage, there is something genuine, a real tenderness, a real desire to care, a real sensitivity to the interior lives of others that makes you, for many people, an irreplaceable presence. But somewhere in the long history of how you became this person, something got misplaced. The idea that care must be constant to be real, that love without vigilance is somehow insufficient, that your worth in any given room is connected to whether the room feels okay. These are not truths, they are the residue of a very old story, a story that began in conditions you did not choose, in a nervous system that did what nervous systems do, adapted, learned, survived. And the question that lives quietly in the space between who you became and who you actually are is not about changing. It is about recognizing that the emotions in the room were never all yours to carry, recognizing that the people you love are not as fragile as your nervous system learned to believe, recognizing that your presence, without the management, without the vigilance, without the quiet performance of emotional responsibility, is still enough. You did not choose to become someone for whom other people's feelings feel like your own responsibility. You were shaped into it by years of small lessons that your nervous system took seriously. And the shape you took, sensitive, attuned, quietly devoted to the emotional well-being of everyone around you, is not a flaw in your character. It is the most coherent response to the world you were given. But you are still in that world, carrying a weight that was never equally distributed. And sometimes, in the quietest moments, when no one needs anything and the room is finally still, something in you wonders what it would feel like to simply be in a room without scanning it, without managing it, without being in some invisible and exhausting way responsible for it. That wondering is not weakness. It is the first honest thing you've let yourself feel in a very long time.